That's good.
Recording in progress.
You have 7 minutes. You have 7 minutes to make coffee. All right. Good morning, everybody. Today is the last daf in Maseches Nazir. Daf Samach Vav.
Revised.
Naziris. So we left off yesterday. We had a Mishnah. We were talking about Raglaim Ladovar. So basically, we discussed a case of by a Zav. So in terms of some of the times, a total for three emissions over the period of 3 consecutive days or less days would make one a complete zav, and he has to be in karbanos. 2, he's a zav for 7 days, and but no karbanos, and 1 is just until the end of the day. He's tamei until the evening, goes to the mikvah. But we were saying over there, if the case of 1 was already an established zav, then there are certain times where we say, okay, what was the reason for the ziva? Maybe there was an outside reason that we can attribute it, and therefore it would not be matami. But once 1 is established as a zav, therefore we say it's a raglaim l'davar. And the Mishnah says, right? Also, v'sfeika v'shvichazera tmeim sharaglaim l'davar. That was what the Mishnah said. Thank you. All right. So we got to the 2 dots. Also, v'sfeika, which is the last 2 words of Samach Hey and Beis. So now we're on the top line of Samach Vav Amud Aleph. Amar Rav. First words of the line. Don't say rather that the suffix we're talking about is whether or not he saw a ziva. Ella vaday chaza, right? The suffix talking about really he saw. And suffix machmas shechla zera, suffix machmas re'iyah, right? So there's a suffix as to whether it was from shechla zera. In other words, if it was perhaps if it was done. If one has during the clean days. Now, in order to get the ziva, you need 7 clean days. Now, if one goes ahead and has he has a ziva attributed to attributed to shechla zara, then he only loses. I'm trying to get my voice out. He only loses 1 day of his count. In other words, he has to count 7 days, and 1 day he had the ziva that was because of shechla zara, so therefore he has to do it 8th day. But if he saw ziva and it cannot be attributed to shechla zara, then he needs 7 more days. Right? He basically starts the count over. I need 7 days added on. Now, so once he's established as a zav, then we're going to attribute that ziva to shechla zara, and therefore the person will have to be it breaks up, and he has to be another 7 days of tahara. And shechla zara matama and tmeya, and therefore the shechla zara of a zav is tmeya. So lamai lagabi what? 4 lines at the top. If we're talking about just in contact with migam shechla zara the tower, even shechla zara tower is matame. Ela zara shel zav matame b'masa. So rather, we're talking about the zera of a zav is matame, even if one goes ahead and does not touch it directly. Rather, it was carried, and if it was carried, even though it was on contact, therefore it will be matame. So man, shmiyas laha, damar shechla zera shel zav matame b'masa. So who is the opinion that says that shechla zera is matame b'masa? If it's this machlokes tonight. Ditanya, we learn in the Brisa, Rebbe Eliezer, Omer, Shechla zera shel zav, ein matame b'masa. So Rebbe Eliezer says clear, right, straight across the board, that Shechla zera shel zav is not matame b'masa. Rebbe Yeshua and Rebbe Yeshua, Omer, matame, says matame b'masa. Lefi she'i efshar la b'loi tichtuch ziva, because the zera, right, of a zav, right, it's impossible not to have any sort of ziva in it. So afilu Rabbi Yeshua lo yamar ela mishum tichtuch ziva, but Rabbi Yeshua only says because the what's it called, the reality of the shechla zera of the zav contains some ziva. However, but if it was shechla zera without any ziva, which is the case we're talking about, the shechla zera is matame. So he would not say it's matame b'masa. So therefore, you can't really go with his explanation. So the Gemara attempts to use a different explanation. Fine. So what does it mean when we say earlier that the shechla zera is tameya? So Ella rather. Right? We're not toilet. Now, in other words, we have a situation where one he had Shechva Zaro was within the last 24 hours. And if one saw Ziva after or within 24 hours, perhaps we can go ahead back and attribute that which he saw. The Ziva was within 24 hours of Shechva Zaro. So therefore, maybe you can say, oh, the reason why his body was like in a we'll soon see in a weakened state or whatever it was, which has caused the Ziva. In other words, he's not really a Zav. Really, it was attributed to an outside factor, like we saw in the Mishnah, right? Shiva Drachim Baitkim as a Zav, right? So over here, so Shein Toilen Ba. So we don't say, so we're not Toilen in the case of there. And that that would be a chumrah. In a case a person who's not established zav, we would say, okay, we attribute it. But if he's already established zav, we don't say, oh no, the ziva only came because of the shechva zar. Rather, we'll say it's itself. So Sarah Pablo Kamei de Rav Lemeimer Aidi Chulshahu. The chazi. It was because he was weakened by a shechva zar. That's the reason why he saw the ziva. Rava, tonight we learn in the Mishnah. Gershon is Gayer. Now, we said earlier that a person is Shechva Zaro, and that within 24 hours there's Ziva. So we say that Ziva is attributed. So let's say the guy was a Ger, he converted. And he converted 1 hour before he converted, right? There was Shechva Zaro. Now, then he converted. And then he saw Ziva, now as a Jew, right? 5 hours later. But it came, right, after the Shechva Zaro, right? So what do you say over there? So it occurred then. So Gershon's gamatame miyad baziva, even though it was miyad, right? So we attribute it to ziva. So where is the toll there? So I'm going to right? So you don't really find something which is even, he had the Shechva Zaro, right? He had a case of where he was misgayer, right? It caused, I'm sure it was very emotionally difficult to be misgayer, and nevertheless we don't attribute it to any of those factors. So you see over there that we're not, we don't go ahead and attribute it because of that. Rather, what's the reason why we normally say that Ziva that follows Shechva Zaro, right, within 24 hours? So it's the Gzeres HaKosov, right? So Ella, rather, let's go back to our original interpretation. What does it mean that when our Mishnah says Shechva Zaro Tameo, when it comes to a person who's established Zav? So rather, it has to do with Masa. If one who was carrying something that was, and there was Shechva Zera upon it from his Zav, that is Matami Masa. And who's this machlokes between Tanai, the Tanya, the Nebraisa, Shechva Zera Shel Zav. The Shechva Zera of a Zav is Matami B'Masa called Meyes Leyes. After, right, if it's for a 24-hour period, right, after, right, that it occurred. So if it's Matami B'Masa. And Rabbi Yosi Aimer, only in that day. So b'may kamiflagi, what's the machlokes over there? But the Shmuel, it had a darshan the pasuk like Shmuel. Rami Ksivi, because the one pasuk says Kiyebecha ish asher lo yetahor mikra laila. It says over there if someone has an occurrence mikra laila, right, which sounds like one time period, right, mikra laila, and then it says Ksivi, the next pasuk over there in pasuk Yud Beis, it says over there, V'haya lifnois erev yirchas b'mayim. It says over there, lifnois erev yirchas b'mayim. When at night he turns towards the night. So lifnos is a lashon, right, and also erev. So it's like a double lashon there. So man, the one who says it's 24-hour period. In other words, a day and night. Daik milifnos erev. Right, he says double lashon there, therefore 2 time periods, day and night, therefore 24 hours. The idach dayak mikra laida says when a night occurrence, and therefore it only says 1 time period, so therefore it only goes till the end of the day. So man, do you remember lifnos erev? I haksiv mikra laila. I, according to opinion, it says lifnos erev. It says mikra laila. Right. So what do you do with that? So since this matter normally occurs at night, therefore it's called mikra laila. It doesn't have to do with the fact that there's only 1 time period. Really, it's meis lies. It's 24 hours. It's matame afterwards. Rather, it's just the way the pasuk calling it because it normally occurs during the night. Fine. Adkan is the Gemara by Zav. Now, Mishnah, last Mishnah of the Masechta, Nazir Hoya Shmuel, Kedivrei Reb Nurai, right? Shmuel, who was, and don't as opposed to Shimshon, who was also say, right? Shmuel was a Nazir. Shinamar, as the pasuk says, Umara Layala Rosha, right before he was born, right? So it said, right, that no razor means a razor shall come upon his head. Al Rosha, right? And Nemar b'Shimshon, so it says Shinamar Mara Layala Rosha. Nemar b'Shimshon says by Shimshon Myra. It says Umayra. V'Nemar b'Shmuel Umayra, and every year each one of them say the word Myra. Shimshon, just like we know by Shimshon Nazir that he was a Nazir. So too by Shmuel it was said Myra Rosha Nazir. Some Rabbi Yosi I b'haloin Myra Ella Shel Basar V'Dam. So he says, well, what do you mean? This is really referring to Myra of Basar V'Dam, right? When it comes to a person of let's say being scared of others, right? More for the word of fear, right? It's referring to fear, right? That's what it meant. They didn't have fear of man. So I'm related. Right? So Shekvar Olav Myra Shel Basar V'Dam. He says, well, he can't go because he's scared of of Shaul. So you see that the statement of that he wasn't fearful of man wasn't true. So obviously he was fearful of man. So what does it mean? Myra Loyala Rosha. There was no Mora upon him. Doesn't mean there was no fear upon him. Rather, it meant there was no razor upon him, meaning that Shmuel himself was a Nazir. Fine. Zok the Gemara.
We usually define a razor as tar. Okay.
But the reference by Shimshon, the lashon of there was used as a razor by Shimshon. So the Moro, so over here by Shmuel was used meant a razor, right? No razor will be upon him. Others say no, meant no fear will be upon him. In other words, he won't fear man. So the arguing Tana says, well, you can't say that because we know he was fearful of Shaul. So he was fearful. So it must be a razor. So Amar Le, Rav Elachia Berei, so turn the page. All right. So he says, right. So 1 second. Amar Le, Rav Lachia, right. Right. Amar Rav Lachia Berei, right. So Rav said to Chia, his son. Excuse me. Right, I was thinking Lachia Berei. I'm like, wait, there's no Chia Berei Chatuf, right? So he says, so Rav said to Chia Berei, his son, Chatuf ubarich, be quick to go ahead and be the mevarich. Go ahead and be the make the one who's benching, right? Who makes the bracha for others, i.e., most commonly often found by Birkas Hamazon. You have a person who's the mevarich who leads. Other times it's going to be just a bracha to be mighty others. So Chatuf ubarich. Right, go ahead and be quick and be the mavarich. So you're going to say that the one who makes the bracha is better. Right, it's greater he who says amen, and I was one who's being mitzi versus the one who's being mitzi other, who's right. Someone else is being mitzi him versus the others. Better say amen. Have someone else make the bracha, and you say amen. That's better than being the one saying the blessing. Right, my goes kachaya Taylor, right? Kachaya, right? Yes, indeed, that's how it is. And Taylor, you should know. Shaharei gularim misaragim b'milchama v'giborim neitzchin. Right, you got the people running in the front lines, but you have the generals and the important people behind them. So it's not the first person in; it's the last people in. So it's not the first person, i.e., the mavarich. Rather, it's the last ones, those who answer amen. So the Gemara says, really, it's tonight. It's a machlokes tonight. The time was in a brayso. Echad hamavarich, v'echad oina amen b'mashma. Right, both of them is mitzi has the mitzvah. Ella shemaharin lemavarich techila. Rather that we go quick in order to go ahead and be the mavarich. So you see clearly from this brayso that to be the mavarich is better versus the other brayso. Rabbi Yosi says, which was a gadol ha'ayner. What does that do with our Mishnah? Why is it brought in? Let's see. There's this dollar here. Brachas and brachas. It could be nothing to do with the Mishnah. They just want to end up with something. Oftentimes they do. They end up with the last part. They end up with something that's uplifting and nice, and therefore I guess there was nothing, no commentary on the Mishnah. So we'll stop here. Yeah. Wait.
More important or the reservoir?
Yeah. So he said,
So there's
I
both
hear.
important.
I hear. All right, very good. So see you for Shabbat on Wednesday.